lost in a sea of ideas. Which ones should we accept? Stay tuned because you're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. Here is your host, Kurt Jarris.
Hey everyone, not Kurt Jarris here, and we have some video difficulties at the moment, so we're just going to hit back to Veracity Hill intro page. So you're just going to listen to me today. And it's all good though, but I'm not definitely Kurt Jarris. I am Chris Yiesla. I'm usually on the other side of the booth, and today Kurt is away for a time, spending a much needed time kind of resting, taking care of some business that is not Veracity Hill. So I am filling in for him today and hopefully next week, unless you guys fire me. So the thing we are talking about today is relevant for a couple reasons that I will share with you here. First of all, as many of you may know, I just got married and got married about, 3 weeks ago. I got married 3 weeks ago. And we just got back recently, and this is my first time back on the show on either side of the booth. And I'm happy to be with you guys. But I wanted to, now having experienced like the things I need to know about concerning marriage and think about concerning marriage and what marriage is, I wanted to, in my 3 weeks of expertise, share that with you guys today. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Many of you may have noticed the episode title is called Let's Get Married, the importance or significance of two becoming one. And I wanted to talk to you guys today about that topic from both the Christian perspective and just kind of a general perspective. We all know what marriage is, or we all know about marriage, whether we are Christian, not Christian, what worldview we have. We know it exists. It exists in our society, many other societies, almost every society. There is marriage in some shape, way, or form. And I wanted to spend some time talking to you guys about what that is, why it's important in America, and what it means. So just taking some time to get my notes up here. And you guys, if you're in the Chicagoland area, you know that it's an incredibly hot day today. We're coming up at like a heat index of like 105. So far, it may not be the hottest day this year, but it's been the hottest day so far this year. And we can definitely feel it. We definitely felt it this morning. So before we get too deep in the episode, to remind you guys that we are hosting a conference on September 29th. Here in the Chicagoland area. We've had a couple conferences at least once every year, and they're always a big hit. People love them. People love seeing them. People love hearing about them, and we like dealing with important topics, big topics. And this year is no exception. We're talking about genocide in Scripture. If you spend any time as a Christian or non-Christian in the Old Testament, you know that there is a lot of stuff that goes on where other nations just seemingly get wiped out. They're just minding on their own business, and Israel shows up in the Promised Land and kills everyone, especially in the book of Joshua. So, and I think a little bit in the books prior as well. But sometimes it can raise an eyebrow, especially today. Like, why would God command genocide in Scripture, of all places? Did he command genocide? Is that what actually happened? And if it did, is he allowed to? So we're going to be answering some of those questions September 28th and September 29th here in the Chicagoland area. You can register or find out more about the conference on defendersmedia.com. You can see who's going to be there, what we'll be talking about, and that will kind of flesh out and take shape as we get more details in and present it to you guys. So keep that pegged in your calendar this September. It's going to be a good time, and we love putting that on. We hope to see you guys all there. So, as I said, I got married a few weeks ago. I have a picture here that we can hopefully, I think we can get that up because we're doing still images today. So if we just pull in that other input, yeah, there we go. So that's me and my lovely wife, seconds after getting married. All the people were there. It was a lot of fun. We got married in southern Michigan. Some of you who know either me or my wife, Laura, may have gotten to see Kurt and I put our regular live streaming skills to use, which usually involve a moving picture. And we were able to kind of get that put together. We put a live stream up of the wedding, and lots of people watched. It was a lot of fun, but it was a great wedding, great time. So I'm now married, but I've spent the last several months talking to people about marriage, getting counsel on marriage, hearing about things from married people and watching marriages. And I thought, you know what, this seems like an appropriate time to talk about marriage. If you guys, even though the image is a little bit lacking today, if you guys have any comments or things to say or comments on what we're talking about, please participate here in the chat below. And let's have a conversation about marriage as we talk about some of these things. So I wanted to read something here that I thought was very interesting, because marriage is a very interesting idea when you sit down and think about it for a very long time or any amount of time. And really, I wanted to see what the rest of the world thinks about it, because I have a view about it, and I want to share it with you guys. But I found this interesting article done by CBS and Vanity Fair in their 60-minute segment. Back at the beginning of 2017, so it's not too terribly old. And they're talking about it here. I just want to read some excerpts from it here. They're entering a new year. It's at the beginning of the new year, and they wanted to ask people what they thought, Americans everywhere, what they thought about marriage. And here's what they have to say. As we enter a new year, we focus on an old institution, marriage. Marriage is mentioned in the Bible as being important in providing men and women with fellowship, companionship, comfort, mutual help, and of course, the blessing of having children. Matrimony can also bring significant benefits to a couple, such as increased financial stability, better health, and longer lives. Their children often receive these same benefits and advantages. Now here we get to do some numbers. I love numbers. I love stats because they're not biased. They're really fun. In 1960, it was estimated that married couples, this is 1960, so this is about, let me do some math here, 58 years ago, more or less. In 1960, it was estimated that married couples made up 78% of American households. It is now estimated to be 48%. So less than half of America is now married, as opposed to 50-some years ago when 2/3, 3/4, I can do math, 3/4 of marriages, or 3/4 of Americans were married. So let's keep reading here. So what are some of the possible reasons for this drop in the percentage of married households in America? It may be because our society has become increasingly liberated, if that's a word you can use, both morally and sexually. The stigma of divorce is not what it used to be, and more women work and are the major breadwinners for their family. It has been estimated that the rate of cohabitation, which is, for those of you who don't know, a couple living together who are not married. What did I just say? The rate of cohabitation since 1960 has increased more than 1,000%. Aside from the liberalized moral standards, this may be due in part to the fact that college graduates are putting off marriage until they are older. In fact, that's pretty true. Back then in the 1950s, 60s, the average marriage age was lower 20s, and nowadays it's upper 20s or early 30s, which is right where I sit with my wife. American factors that were recently reported by CBS News is that 40% of young Americans aged 18 to 34 are back living at home with their relatives. This is the highest percentage in 75 years since the Great Depression ended, and has been attributed in part to the mounting school debts as well as the high cost of housing. Despite these cultural and economic factors, marriage remains a goal and a dream for a great many people, a testament to the power of love. So, just from that early viewpoint there, we can see that marriage still has a significant place in marriage. Or marriage still has a significant place in society. And that even though the numbers are dropping, people still seem to have an idea of what it is, and they want it badly. So let's keep reading for a second here before I read off some more stats from my own research here. In the view of majority of Americans, the majority being 53% in this case, the main purpose of marriage today, this is regardless of viewpoint, is to mark a commitment between two people in love. Nearly 1 in 4, however, see it as providing the best environment for raising children, which is very arguable and good. And 1 out of 5 do not think it has much purpose today at all. So that's 20% of Americans think marriage has no purpose. 53% of Americans think, hey, it's a pretty good mark of commitment between two people who are in a relationship, who are in love. And then we have another stat here that apparently 9 out of 10 of Americans still agree with. Even if you think marriage has no purpose, some people think, wow, this is pretty cool. Americans resoundingly believe that is an inspiring accomplishment to stay the course with your spouse for more than half a century. According to one study by the Census Bureau, only 6% of married couples make it to their 50th anniversary. So, remember that stat. 6% of married couples make it to their 50th anniversary. Let's face it, a lot of things have to go right. According to some who have reached their golden anniversary, some of the biggest keys to success are communicating well, supporting each other no matter what, having a sense of humor, and of course, loving, respecting, and being kind to one another. So we have this interesting shift culturally in marriage that, hey, it's gone from being 3/4 of people who are being married to being less than half of people today are married. But everyone still sees it as an ideal that they should strive for, especially if you are in love. Half people who are married, not married in America, think that marriage is a mark of a commitment. And everyone, 97% of people are incredibly impressed. I'll make sure I got that stat right. Was it 97? 91. So in the upper 90s, 9 out of 10 Americans agree that when people reach their 50th anniversary in marriage, it's pretty darn impressive. So I want to read some stats today about relationships in general. If you guys think about this, let me see if I can find this stat here. And Kurt, our beloved host, who is watching from the wings, asks why we think Americans are waiting longer to get married. And there's a couple reasons that CBS Vanity Fair said here. One of them is that possibly school debt is a pain in the butt. Housing is a pain in the butt. Let's see. Where is that other bit? Graduates are putting off marriage. And a lot of them are just trying to want to keep their independence, I think. You can move around a little bit more. If any of you have paid taxes while you're married in certain circumstances under current tax codes or past tax codes, I guess tax codes are getting ready to change. Sometimes there's penalties for being married. And sometimes it's a pain in the butt. And sometimes if you sign a marriage license, it's really hard to get out of that relationship. That'll kind of come into its own in a second. So maybe, Kurt, we can find some answers to why people are waiting a little bit longer to get married. Let's see here. Okay, I'm going to pull up my laptop here, and it's in a really bad position. There you go. Can you guys hear me? Is that better? Great. Okay, so I want you to think about how relationships work in America. You all are in America, except, of course, if you're in New Zealand. Hey, by the way, did you know that we are the #1 internationally broadcast apologetic podcast in West Chicago? Tell that to your friends. Share and like on Facebook. But if you're listening in New Zealand right now, hi there. Good morning. It's really early. It's like 3 in the morning in New Zealand right now. Maybe 4 in the morning. God bless you for working the third shift and staying up late to listen to us. Thank you. We really appreciate it. But on this podcast today, in America, we're talking about American relationships here. And maybe they work the same way. If you're in New Zealand and they work the same way, leave a comment. Let me know in chat. So think about the way we conduct relationships today. We conduct any kind of relationships, finding a mate or finding a person to be with, to be in love with, the way we go about seeking those relationships. We've got a couple different ways that we like to do it in America, regardless of the way people like to do it in an old school way, or I like to do it. In America, we have several ways we like to do it. We like to date. And that really came into its own in the 1950s, and when people really had, high schoolers specifically, could en masse get a car and could pick up Susie from school and go to the soda fountain, and they didn't need to get the parents involved. And that means you could do that more often, more frequently. You could date. You could date one girl, and then you could be going steady, right? Regardless of what I think about it, that's how we do it. That's how we've done it. And it's evolved a little bit over in America over the last couple of decades. And now in this era, what we are doing is we've kind of gotten the internet involved. Remember when the internet became a thing? We got the internet involved. And what happened with that is we like using the internet to make things convenient for all resources, whether those resources are good or bad for the economy, good for our moral health or bad for our moral health. The internet became a place where you can conduct relationships. So we ended up with stuff like eHarmony and Match.com and recently Zoosk. And these are all sites based on taking your info and compatibility and making it so you can find someone whom you're quote unquote compatible with. And that's how we like conducting relationships now. It takes away a lot of the uncertainty. It feels like it takes away a lot of the time. Oh, and my absolute personal favorite, christianmingle.com. I think that is very, very interesting. And I spent a lot of time in my downtime criticizing such sites. If you found your significant other on those sites, may you have a long, happy life. But I think there are better ways to do it. It works sometimes, but that's the way I'm saying, regardless of my opinion, those are the ways that we conduct those things in America today. Until about the last decade. And then we had smartphones show up a little bit over a decade ago, I feel like. And recently, apps showed up that made dating even easier. You think websites are easy. Apps, all you got to do is touch with your finger. You got to swipe right. So we end up with things like Bumble and Tinder. And people have multiple dates a week. In fact, Tinder has unfortunately earned a little bit of a reputation of being something other than that. And like, who needs a significant other? People use it to get really quick weekend encounters in their relationships. Even though that's not the way Tinder advertises, that's what we use it for. So that's how we find relationships, how we find encounters, long or short, of significant others in America, is through websites, through apps, through common interests we find at work or at school. And that has been the main way we've done things. So we're going to take a minute off to the side and see if we can get the video back up for you guys, but I'm going to keep talking in the meantime. So I want to read some stats to you guys about relationships in general. These come from various sources, which you can check their credibility or not credibility. Some of them I think are credible, some of them are not, but they are the ones who did the research and polled the people and did the numbers. So the average millennial relationship, and millennial being my age and just a little bit on the other side, either direction, the average millennial relationship, married or no, lasts 2.75 to 4 years. Hey guys, there we go. There we go. Let's get this moving. Let's get this moving and shaking. There we go. That's fantastic. I can see you guys. And I'm moving around the screen a little bit, but that's okay. That's okay. Let me just, how you guys doing? Thanks for being patient. You guys are amazing people. Okay. That's much better. There we go. Veracity Hill, where we figure it out as we go, just like life. But okay, so let's get back to our stats. Human relationships, millennial relationships in America today, last on average 2.75 to 4 years. Okay. So usually from the time you start a relationship to even if you include marriage in that, 2.5 to 4 years, let's say for simplicity. Those are the stats I found. On average, a relationship will last that long. The average American male will be in 6 relationships in his lifetime. The average female will be in 5 relationships in her lifetime. So you've got these really short relationships in a high frequency, 5 to 6 relationships in their lifetime. So let's look at those numbers. Let's think about that for a second. If I want to get married, right? Let's say that both you and the other person have a good idea how you feel about marriage. You're in a relationship now. You're in one of those 5 to 6 average relationships. Maybe, hopefully, you have fewer. Maybe you have more. But this means, if you think about those numbers, right? You want to get married. There's 6 relationships. Let's say you're doing 6 relationships, right? That means 5 to 6 relationships in your lifetime. Let's say one of them ends in marriage. That means that you have about roughly 16 to 20% chance that the relationship you're in now, if you're both thinking about marriage in the future, has a chance of ending in marriage if you do things the way that we're doing things now in America. So there's a 20% chance that the person you're currently with, you'll marry. Now, I don't need to tell you guys that divorce rates right now, nowadays, are like 50%. Right? And we said a minute ago that what, 48% of people are married? Where is that number? 48% of people are married right now in America. But half of them are going to end their marriage in divorce, or actually less. Here, listen to this. So divorce rate is 50%. And then this was one of the most discouraging things I found. Like, divorce sucks. It's a horrible thing for anyone involved. Sorry if you've been divorced. My heart goes out to you. I know it's really hard. there's a divorce rate is 50%, and that rate for you, if you get divorced, goes subsequently higher with each successive marriage. So if you have, let's say, 3 marriages, unfortunately, the first marriage ends in divorce, the second marriage has a higher chance of ending in divorce, and the next marriage has an even higher chance of ending in divorce, so on and so forth if you go that far. So that means that if you, let's say you get married, you want to be married, you want to stay married, and you're in that 20% relationship, like, hey, we're going to do it. We're going to get married, 20%. That means these are extreme rough numbers because my probability is not what it used to be in high school. I was top of my class. Following these cultural trends, if we conduct relationships the way they're being conducted today, and we get married to that 20%, that one relationship out of 6, then the divorce rate is 50% for our first marriage. That means that the marriage, if you get married in a relationship, you have, according to today's standards, a 10 to 20% chance that your marriage will last the entire term of your lifelong commitment, that you will get in a relationship, stay in a relationship, get married, stay married until one of you drops dead. 10 to 20%. Those numbers are horrible. I don't like those at all. Do you like those numbers? I don't like those numbers. So there's got to be a different way. And I've spent actually the last couple of years, a lot of my friends have been getting married because I'm in those upper 20s. I was in those mid 20s. That's when people are starting to think about getting married, right? They get married, they find someone they want to spend the rest of their life with. And they get married. And they don't stay married. I have seen a lot of people who I knew, some close, some not, who are my age, get married, and then 1 to 3 years later, they're calling it quits. That's it. They're done. The thing that's supposed to be a lifelong commitment, they want to get to that golden anniversary, 50 years. They're done already before they've even gotten out of the gate. They just say, we can't do this anymore. It's too hard. We don't want to do it for different reasons. Sometimes there's jealousy. Sometimes it's financial reasons. If you've been in a relationship that has ended or a marriage that has ended, you know why. And there was a problem of some kind and it was hard. But it broke my heart to see these people get into these marriages and then they're getting out. And at least once or twice over the last couple of years, I have seen a friend of mine end a marriage. And I was like, wow, I didn't expect that. So, and here's something even more discouraging. We all know that we change as people, right? Every 5 to 7 years, you change as a person. Did you know that? Did you know that the person you are today is going to be different than the person that you are later? In 5 years, 7 years, even if you don't ever get married, you just change. You grow. Layers get added on you. So if you're in a relationship with someone, that means they're going to be a different person in 5 to 7 years. And you're wanting to make that relationship last a lifetime. So you have to find a way to stay with them for all the changes. There's no great, hey, my buddy Bill Shakespeare, right? I call him Bill. Good guy. He wrote a lot of cool plays, sonnets. And one of his sonnets about love says, love alters not when alteration finds, meaning that when love sees something that has changed in the other person, it doesn't change. So I bet we all want to know how to kind of find that love, right? So if you think about those things, think about all the stats we have right now that we just said, right? 60 Minutes, Vanity Fair said that everyone kind of has an ideal of marriage. They think it's healthy for kids, it's healthy for relationships, it gives you better stability if it goes well. But not as many people are getting married. And the stats I just read says that if you follow the way the culture conducts relationships on the whole in America or New Zealand, wherever you're at, your chances of getting to a marriage that lasts a lifetime is 10 to 20%, and that's abysmally low. So why get married? It seems hard. Why get married at all? Those numbers are horrible. I'm an odds man. I like playing by the odds. I'm not Han Solo. I need to be told the odds. And if you tell me my chances are 10 to 20% of finding a life partner and staying with them forever until I die, I don't want to get married. So we have to figure out what's going on with marriage here. So I'm going to read some things from the Christian worldview as to why one should get married. And then I want to share some books with you. How are we doing on time? We're doing great on time. Where did all my books go? Oh, here we go. Okay, so I'm just reading some verses from the Bible. All of you have probably heard some of these before, but CBS Vanity Fair 60 Minutes referenced the Bible within like the first 2 sentences. Marriage is mentioned in the Bible as being important in providing men and women a fellowship, companionship, etc., etc., etc. So it thinks the Bible has something to say about this, and I agree. Surprise. So let's take a look here. at these verses that I've laid out, right? I'm just going to read a couple of them. From Genesis 2, this is how marriage showed up. Whether you believe Genesis is a literal account, figurative account, younger, older, don't care. This happened. This conversation happened in some way. Lord God said, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." Now the Lord God had formed all the out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds of the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, it was his name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, bird and sky, and all the wild animals. But for Adam, no suitable helper was found. So the Lord caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with flesh. Ouch. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man and brought her to the man. The man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. This is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh." Now, if that sounds familiar to you, people say it all the time. They usually say it at weddings. They said it at my wedding. Jesus quoted it later, several thousand years later, in Matthew, the book of Matthew, and I think in Mark as well. But the Pharisees, who were the religious leaders at the time, we're just going to jump straight to Matthew 19. And, whoops, that's not Matthew 19. Here we go. Jesus was saying some stuff, and large crowds followed him, and the Pharisees came to him to test him. And they said, "Hey, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason?" They're like, can we divorce our wives if we want to? Is that okay? So this is how Jesus, the Son of God, according to the Bible and the Christian worldview, says about marriage. "Haven't you read that at the beginning," which we just read, "the Creator made them male and female and said, 'For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh.'" That's the end of the Genesis quote. And then he goes on and adds his own stuff. Continues on. "So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." And the Pharisees are like, "Well, why then did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away?" Jesus replied, "Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. But it was not this way from the beginning. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another woman commits adultery." And then the disciples said to him, "This is the situation between a husband and wife. It's better not to marry." So they asked the same question. Like, whoa, wait a minute. Marriage is hard. If we don't have an out, why are we getting married? So Jesus is telling them, hey, this is what I think about marriage. Marriage is where I take a male and a female, specifically in this worldview, and I combine them into one flesh. They're united together. They leave their respective families from which they came, and they come together to form a flesh, one flesh. And so Jesus revisits that, and he says, hey, they're no longer two people. They're now one flesh. In the Greek Bible, which you don't need to understand in order to appreciate the Bible, the Greek says they are no longer two fleshes, but one flesh. So God has brought them before all of creation, has changed their makeup, their way of thinking, right? The way of being. They're now one person and two separate entities. What God has joined together, let no one separate. He's saying, hey, I take marriage very seriously. Don't screw around with it. I don't want you guys getting divorced, please, because I worked really hard to take the two of you and make you one being that has never existed before. And if you look back in Genesis 2, maybe 1, Genesis 1, he said male and female, he created them, right? He made mankind in the image of God, male and female. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. So, Jesus takes marriage very seriously. And I want to read something to you guys. I'm running short on time. How did this happen? I wanted to read something that I wrote to you guys. No, I didn't write to you guys. I haven't written anything to you guys. I wrote to my wife before we were married. Because I want to let you know what you're getting into and what I think about marriage and what I want us to think about marriage. And I did some research based on books that I will recommend to you all at the end. If you want a happy marriage, if you want a good viewpoint on marriage, these are good books. They've helped me a ton, and I want to recommend them to you. But I collaborated all together, and I made my own definition of what I think marriage is according to what I pulled from some of these verses, more verses, my time in the church, and how I've watched marriages play out, and what I want a successful marriage to look like. So here it is. Some of this may sound familiar, and I want you guys to post your thoughts in the comments. Put it in chat. What do you think? Okay. Marriage is a lifelong covenant joining one male and one female into a brand new entity with the purpose of fully representing the image of God within humanity. Their bodies, minds, and souls are melded together into one being, yet with each person retaining their individual identity. Sounds a little bit like God, doesn't it? This melding is traditionally referred to as, quote unquote, one flesh, and can only be enacted by God. So we have the state, we have the legal side that legally says you're married, but in terms of your souls and your bodies being one, that's God's business, and he takes that very seriously. Once performed, it is irreversible. That's why God, Jesus, Son of God, all of them are saying, don't get divorced. It's really messy. Those of you who have been through divorce know it's hard. I've watched a lot of you get divorces. It is messy. It's never easy. It's messy. You know this from experience. I've watched it. You've been through it. Husband and wife are drawn into intimacy through their complete love and vulnerability to one another, willfully choosing to accept the full person of the other as their mate for life. They each seek to be devoted to the good of the other at the cost of their own desires, no matter what hardships may come. This is probably the easiest way to avoid marriages that only last 1 to 3 years, and may explain why the divorce rate is really high. Because in our society, we have been trained, for better or worse, that we are a consumer nation. You want it? Put it on your phone. You can buy it. You can have it. Just reach out and take it. It's yours. What do you want? Do you want that Coke? Supersize it, right? Get a fries, get a Coke, eat healthy if you want to. What do you want? Do you want that sandwich? Do you want it delivered to you? We can deliver that sandwich to you. Do you want a marriage? Do you want someone who will make you happy? We can set up a website so you find someone who makes you happy. But then and this is why I don't like, forgive me if you've been on a dating website and you have a relationship that way. If it's going well, props to you, right? If you got married through a dating relationship or a dating website or an app and it's working well for you, props to you. But the worrying reason, the downfall, the weak spot or the blind spot to those oftentimes is that when you're on there, you're already there with the mindset, even if you find the perfect match. Both of you are there with the intent of the person I find is going to make me happy. That's why I'm here. I want to find someone to make me happy. And then it'll work. You guys will be in a relationship. You guys are happy. You guys get married. You're happy. Maybe for a time, but you're both looking to each other for your own happiness. And that first paragraph I just read talks about willfully choosing to accept the full other person of the other as their mate for life. So from the get-go, we're going to be together for life. Divorce isn't an option. They seek to be devoted to the good of the other at the cost of their own desire, no matter what hardships may come. You hear that phrase? For better, for worse, for rich or poor, till death do us part, right? So going into, I had an elder once at a conference. It's been one of the best marriage advice I ever got. If you want to have a better marriage, he was talking to men who were in their 10th, 15th, 25th year of marriage. So if you want to have a better marriage, go home and die some more. Die to your wife. Die to your own desires and seek to please her. What does she need? What does she want? Please those things before you please yourself. And it seems like it should be obvious, but a lot of times we're looking for I need my wife to make me happy. I would like my wife to make me dinner. I would like my wife to be there. All these things I kind of want. And I do. I have to fight those things. I want my wife to be there, but before I want those things, I really, really want to please my wife. I'm going to go do the dishes. I'm going to go make the bed. I'm going to give her a back rub, right? I'm going to do all these things that I can to please my wife. And successful marriages that I've seen continue have that in mind, where the husband is seeking to please the wife and the wife is seeking to please the husband. There's a bunch of biblical things that Paul says in the New Testament about this. Highly recommend that lifestyle. Kurt is married. He can probably tell you, if you're still in the chat, that that's a really good idea. And any of you married folk, if you're in the chat right now and you have something to say about marriage, toward that end, I recommend saying it, please. All right, so we're going to take a short break real quick. It's already 1:47 p.m. We got a little bit of a late start. We're going to go a little bit later today, but we're going to take a short break and a word from our sponsors. When we get back, we're going to talk about roles in marriage from my little definition, which I know sometimes is controversial, especially in America today. All right, stay tuned. We will be back after the break.
You're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
Evangelical Christians are talking about hell. What if we believe what we believe because we've always believed it? What if the gospel is really a matter of life and death? We want you to open your mind, open your Bible, and rethink hell. At rethinkinghell.com, evangelicals look at what the Bible says about hell, putting conventional and controversial views to the test.
Have you heard of the Google Ad Grant for nonprofits? 501c3 nonprofit organizations can receive $10,000 per month in online advertising credit from Google, empowering you to share your message with the world. At Defenders Media, we partnered with Nonprofit Megaphone, an agency focused solely on Google grant acquisition and management. They got us approved for the grant and now manage ad campaigns, bringing hundreds of new people to our websites each month. If you are eligible, Nonprofit Megaphone will acquire and manage the grant for you for a month for free to see if they can help you too. Visit nonprofitmegaphone.com to learn more.
All right. Hey, welcome back to Veracity Hill. We're striving for truth on faith, society, and the other thing that we strive for truth on. What do we strive for truth on? Oh my gosh. Politics. All the things that are important in life. Faith, politics, and society. We're striving for truth in all these areas, including marriage, especially today. Welcome back from the break. You can like, comment, and subscribe here on Veracity Hill. You can catch us on YouTube. You can catch us here on Spreaker, on our website if you want to become a donor. We appreciate that, especially with a lot of the incentives that we have going on right now, which I know Curtis told you about, and we'll be telling you about again in a few weeks when he's back. Again, if you want to be part of the Defenders Conference happening in September, late September, 28th and 29th, the weekend of, we highly encourage you to sign up now. Get interested. Get going. It's going to be a lot of fun. We always bring in a lot of good speakers, and we're excited to have you there. September 28th and 29th on genocide. Let's continue on in marriage. In the time we have left, we've got about maybe 10, 20 minutes if I stretch it. I want to hear from you guys. What do you think? What's going on with marriage? What do you guys think? So let's talk about roles in marriage. This is the next thing that I wrote to my now wife about how I thought about marriage. I said the covenant, there's a fun word that gets tossed around. A covenant is like a contract, but it's really personal. A covenant says like, hey, I'm devoting all of myself to you for a purpose. That's a covenant. And they're really important. So this covenant, which I think marriage is, and the Bible also thinks marriage is, the covenant is not symmetrical, but complementary. Men and women have different roles? What? Male and female have different roles in the marriage that fall in line with the wiring their Creator placed in them. This is important, this next part, because I know some of you are probably getting a little upset. While their roles are different, their value is not. So there's just a difference between a role someone plays and their value. And men and women's value, especially in the eyes of Christ, is right here. It's the same. It's all good, right? But the roles do not place them in different values. They just mean that they're complementary roles that work together. They're not the same. Are not symmetrical. They're different. They work together. Let me tell you what I mean. They're both equal parts with different functions. Husbands are to love their wives, leading them firmly, cherishing them tenderly, nurturing them spiritually, providing security emotionally, and protecting them zealously. Wives are to respect their husbands, submitting to them joyfully, following them thoughtfully, and supporting them fully. Men are naturally inclined to slip into a leadership role in the marriage, and women are naturally inclined to slip into a supporting role in the marriage. While every human is created differently, reversing these roles completely almost always creates an unhealthy corrosion on the bond between husband and wife. These are things I have gathered by watching this happen in marriages that have been around for several decades. Whether they are near me or far from me, I've watched them as the roles kind of switch, and the marriage is not in a good shape. It's not in a good place. Great man, great woman, but they're each trying to do the other role. For whatever reason, for whatever circumstances, doesn't work out. It's not good. Men are naturally inclined to be encouraged to lead, and women are naturally inclined to be encouraged to support as wives in that marriage relationship. And it works out really well that way. There's not a different value to those roles. A lot of that comes as a straight pull from Ephesians 5, which you may be familiar with. Ephesians 5, 23 through 33, which I'm not going to read because I essentially just paraphrased it. Talks about the roles of husband and wife from a Christian perspective. And at the end, it really talks about what we need as men and as women. Each man must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. If you do nothing else in that paragraph, the primary thing that a husband really needs from you, wives, is respect. That's how he functions. It builds him up. And husbands, the primary thing your wife needs is love. Not more hours at the office, not new cars, not a bigger house. Security is great, but she really just wants your love. She really wants to know every day that you love and cherish her, and your eyes and your mind are for her. And if you guys both do that and give, it's a really refreshing, healing, building up cycle in a marriage. Why it's really important, which is why I said the opposite almost always results in corrosion. Let's see. Last paragraph that I wrote. Together, the husband and wife create from the raw materials given to them, which is what Adam and Eve were doing. Remember, they were in the garden. They were in Eden. They were in the garden. And God's like, hey, it's not good for man to be alone. I'm going to bring him a helper suitable for him. And they took care of the garden. They took care of the animals. They took care of God's creation together as partner, as life mates. They took care of things together. They worked together with the raw materials as gardeners to create something. And so it still continues today in marriages. They create from the raw materials given to them, shifting their direction and goals as life changes and the Lord leads. God uses marriage to perpetuate his character throughout humanity, specifically through the family unit. As God in his persons created out of the outpouring of his love, husband and wife also create and give life out of the outpouring of their love. The result is a community that is blessed by their marriage and a household that may be blessed by children. While romance between one another is an essential part, it is not the end goal of marriage. So that's why one of the greatest pieces of my advice that I received from my now father-in-law was this. You know, a lot of people get married. We talked about the quote here from the CBS Vanity Fair poll. You can find easily just by searching that and searching marriage. That poll comes right up. It's like the first thing. A lot of people talk about marriage and love, right? We see love in movies. We see like, we want to get to marriage. There's all this love. It's great. But essentially, the advice that my father-in-law gave me was never get married for love. So he's like, if you marry my daughter, do not marry her because you love her. Marry her because you two are suitable for one another. So a romantic relationship in a marriage is incredibly important. It's great. It's a very great expression and building up of that tightness, of that unity, but it's not the end goal, and hopefully it's not the reason one gets married. There will be love there. There will be partnership there for people who want to get married. But I pass that advice on to you, single people. If you want to get married, never get married for love. Always get married because you are suitable for each other. It's a good thing. So, where did I stop? Oneness is not achieved through the acquiring of a spouse, but through their continued togetherness. So that oneness, that one flesh, is from them being together continually. Together, they create the whole. Together, they become part of one another. Like all things within creation, marriage begins with God and ends with God. Only God can create and sustain a healthy union between two humans. And a thriving marriage will point right back to God's character. Outside of the person of Jesus of Nazareth, man and woman coming together in this way is the most complete representation of God within the species of humanity. I firmly believe that it is the most complete representation of God within the species of humanity. However, the inference from that is that I'm knocking people who are single, of which I was one a month ago. Not true. Not true. Humans of all shapes and sizes and stages of life are made in the image of God. And if you are single, you have a very important role, and you have great opportunities and flexibility and energy and time to go places and do things that you do not have when you are married. Those of you who went from being single to being married know this, right? We even know this in society. Like that's the whole point of like having bachelor parties and bachelorettes parties, no matter what you think of those, is that this is your last night to be single. Let's revel in it. So being single has its advantages. Being married has its advantages. And you have to weigh like, which of those things do I want? Because being single is its own gift, its own reward. And you can do a lot of things that you can't do when you're married. You can also do a lot of things that are when you're married that you can't do when you're single. So they each have their own stages, their own functions, just like different parts. But neither of them are superior stages of life. And there's not superior roles. Even though one typically precedes the other. They are equal roles. They're good. They're just different. So I want you guys to think about that. I do revere marriage in the way that I just spoke, but I don't do it in the way that knocks around singleness, which is super cool. Let me see what else I have for you guys today. So that's what I think about marriage. And really, that's what I went into my marriage of my wife thinking is from seeing all those marriages that weren't working out, the people that were getting divorced in 1 to 5 years, the people around me who were getting to their 25 years, they've They've got all their assets in place. They're rooted down 25 years, 35 years, 45 years, and they are in trouble because something is missing, something is wrong. And I watched those, and I wanted to avoid those pitfalls as well. I wanted to avoid the stats that I read you at the beginning and the top of the hour, where only 48% of people are married, and about half of those aren't even making it to the end. Aren't even making it to the end of the covenant, which is for life. And it's only for life. It doesn't go beyond that. In fact, I know that when my covenant ends, which it will end, like marriage will end. If you're married, your marriage will end in some way. Hopefully, the covenant says it ends when one of you passes away, leaves this mortal coil. The other person is left. If for some reason, me and my wife will both die eventually. But if my wife dies first, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm a single man again, and I knew how I served the church as a single man. I knew how I had that energy, and I'm going to go back to doing that. And that's important. And I was at a conference once in Colorado with one of my dear brothers in Christ. Shout out to my friend Josh. Hopefully you're listening today. I went out to put on a conference, help him put on a conference, and one of the pastors, elders who was there said like, hey, he said that same thing. If my life mate dies first, I know exactly what I'm doing, because he had served the Lord as a single man in his early 20s, late 20s, and he knew exactly how to do that. And he knew exactly how to serve the Lord and serve his brothers and sisters. Like if I'm still here when my marriage ends, which he would be if his spouse dies, then he knows exactly what he's going back to. And so don't try and burn bridges to singleness too quickly, because you will be coming back to it at some point. And it's good to remember how to do that. So it's good also to remember hey, if you're, like I was saying, if you're single and you're wanting to get married, to be thinking I'm not going to come back here for a while, several decades, hopefully, many, many decades. I hope that all of you who are married make it to your golden anniversary. That's a huge accomplishment. Most of America is incredibly impressed by that, and I want to be impressed with you and learn your secrets. But it was a good idea for me to sit and ponder hey, what do I need to really think about this, because I'm not coming back here for long. If I marry this woman that I do love, I'm not coming back to single Chris. Possibly ever. I might, but I'm leaving this stage. I'm not coming back. So there's a lot of gravity to think about. But I wanted to, sorry for that little soapbox tangent. These are things that I wanted to think about, and I wanted to make sure we're at the bedrock of our marriage, because you want to build a good foundation. In the Bible, and I didn't find this verse. I'm actually really mad. Oh, wait, I've got my Bible right here. Maybe I can find it. I just read it in my quiet times. If you're not a Christian, a quiet time is basically a time where you sit down and read your Bible for a bit. There it is. It's right here, because I just read it. It's in Luke 14. Which of you, he's talking about following Jesus, but the same applies to marriage. Which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. And he goes on and says the same thing about a king. I wanted to make sure before I got married to my wife that I knew what I was doing, that I went away emotionally, spiritually, my heart, and I went away to prepare a place for her. I need to make sure my heart is a place where she will be safe, where we will have a good environment to be married. The habits and the things that we've laid at the foundation are what help us to survive at least 50 years in a marriage. That's what I want. So I wanted to make sure that I took away all the things that I see from society that are bad, and I throw them away and find how we avoid those together, and how I serve her in a way that avoids that mentality together. And I take the good things I see from society and I embrace those. I see the good things from marriages that have succeeded, and I take away the bad things that I've watched from marriages that are in trouble. Midlife crisis country. I take away those things and I throw them away. And I don't want them in my marriage. And I know that we will have hardships. All marriages have hardships. Things are hard as you take two selfish people and try to make them one. But the key to making sure your marriage lasts beyond year 3 to 4 and that your marriage doesn't end in divorce is making sure that both of you are serving each other and hopefully serving Christ. If you serve Christ, if you're going to him together as your source for energy, that gives you energy to serve one another. Let me explain. If you love the Lord more than you love your spouse, that's actually a really good thing, because you're taking something. If you're looking at each other to fulfill happiness, that's a fuel that doesn't last, because essentially from a human soul food standpoint, you are looking to this person, this spouse, to be a god. And your wife or your husband probably makes a great spouse. I guarantee you they make a horrible god. And a lot of marriages get caught on that, whether people are religious or not. They're worshiping their spouse, or they want to say, you are a god, provide me my happiness. And that's a pitfall to avoid. So when me and my wife keep God at the center of our marriage, and that's not just a statement, that's not just a catchy bumper sticker to put on your car. You have to actually love the Lord and go to him and say, I need strength to love my spouse today. I need help. I need wisdom. We need you. And then you go together and you pray, we need you, Lord. That's a really good thing to do, because then you are then being supplied an infinite amount of energy to do something which 50% of Americans think is impossible to do more than 3 years. You guys can do it together by loving the Lord. So I want to pass that on to you guys. Really, you guys have to work together. You have to put each other before yourself. You die to yourself, completely die to yourself and serve your spouse. And you can only do that if you have energy from the Lord. And I want to really encourage you, I really want to encourage you with that. I was looking at some of the comments. Dan, kiss and don't last, cook and do. That's right. And I like that. It's great. Kurt asks, how do we help explain the Christian view of marriage to our ever secular society today? So I think a good thing when I'm talking to people from a secular society is I ask them questions. And Kurt, you probably know the way for arguing this way, apologetically, philosophically. Kurt is very sharp when it comes to these things. But is asking them, what do they want from a marriage? Do they think this other person will make them happy for life? Do they want to get married? And then start explaining some of the things that I just said that I believe. It's like, hey, you can love someone else with your entire being only if you have energy. Because if you think about stuff, if you're not getting energy from another source, if I love my spouse with all of me, then I have no energy left for me. Like, I can't function. All of my energy is gone. If I take all the gas out of my tiny 2012 Mazda 3 and I put it in your car, my car doesn't have any gas anymore. So you both need to be getting your gas from a same source together so you can give it to each other. That analogy kind of breaks down because everyone gets gas. But if we're only two people on the planet, we need to have an infinite source of gas, of energy, of something. Something needs to be infinite that isn't from us, because we're going to run out of steam at some point. And that's a good thing to remember. This is why I said don't get married. And Dan brought this up, a good point. Don't get married for love, because the love will last, but the firework love that you guys feel before you're married, in your relationship, in your courtship, while you're dating, at the beginning of the honeymoon phase of marriage, while you're newlywed, it's not going to last. Because life happens. It just happens. It's not because you guys have failed. It's not because the love is gone. It's just you're busy. Life happens. Kids happen. Work happens. Trials happen. Church happens. Growth happens. Medical things happen. And it's really hard to remember what that felt like. But it's underneath, there's a very serious, very strong foundation of true, deep, rich love that is sacrificial, that says, I don't care how hard things are. I'm going to sacrifice everything I am for you, because that's what I signed up for when I put on this ring. And that's what I'm going to carry through with. And that's hard to do, but the rewards, I'm told, and I've seen from marriages that have lasted 40, 50 years, are great indeed. So I encourage all people from a Christian or secular standpoint, to really, you need to be looking to something to save you that is higher than you, and looking to something to provide marriage that energy. If the love feels like it's fizzled out, it's not. That firework love will, but the deep love is what needs to be worked on by both of you. Look to the other person and ask, how can I serve them today? What can I do? So marriage is really much a huge indicator of the image of God. It shows that love, that oneness, that two-ness, that distinct, separate, but one entity. And so in humanity, it's really, really profound to see how that's carried out. Husband and wife existing with each other in one entity, but two separate entities choosing to love each other and wanting to love each other perfectly. Me giving all of myself to my wife, and my wife giving all of myself to me. I could keep rambling, and I will for a time. Just kidding, I won't. I'm out of time. Before I go, I want to pass along some resources to you guys that have been really helpful to me. They're all books. Me and my wife recently read while we were recording in our courtship. If you want to know what a courtship is, ask me personally on Facebook, because we're out of time today on the show. This Momentary Marriage by our good friend, Mr. John Piper. He wrote it. My wife had the opportunity to edit some of his works. She's an editor. And we read this Momentary Marriage together. It really helps to answer. There's a lot of books out there that will tell you, should you get married? And how you have a successful marriage, but this is the first book I ever read that told me why I should get married in the first place. Why bother with all this? John Piper does a good job of laying that out in a way that anyone can easily understand. He takes his time. He moves very slowly. Highly recommend it. This Momentary Marriage by John Piper. Love and Respect by Dr. Egerich, I think. Egerich. Was gifted to me a long time ago when I was just in college by my father. He loved it. I love it. I still use the principles today in my day-to-day with my wife. In my day-to-day when we were courting, when we were engaged, I use the principles of like, how do I attend to my wife's needs when she's not my wife, because I need to start practicing now. This tells you probably what's going on if your marriage feels like it's being corroded and you guys aren't getting anywhere. It tells you, here's what's probably going on. Here's the need that's not being met. Here's how you guys fix it. Start today. You don't need to go to like counseling sessions. Here's how you start. Maybe some of you do, right? Okay. Love and Respect, Dr. Egerich. For Men Only and for Women Only. 2 different books by Shanti and Jeff Feldhan. Amazing. The Men Only book, I was like, here's how women think. And I'm going to explain it to you in a way that you as a man can understand, and you will no longer think that the way that women think is silly. And women, here's the way men think, and you'll no longer think the way that men think is silly. And it also has anticipated me. It also has helped me to anticipate the needs of my wife before they show up. And it has given me a beautiful appreciation for how women are wired. You ladies are amazing. You guys are great. Props to you all. I really respect the way that you guys have to, the things you have to deal with and the things you have to think through and the way your mind functions. I get it. It's cool. And I know it's annoying sometimes. That's a good one. And then recently, the most recent book I read was Love That Lasts by Jeff and Alyssa Bethke, who together are a married couple that run a marriage ministry. Highly recommended. It's a different take on marriage. Basically, it's their testimony. They talk about a lot of foundational things. They run a lot of workshops. They are a really good set of people. So I'll post those books in the comments after the show is done so you guys can see them, link them, move on together. And that is it. So I think we're all done. I think I could talk. I'm out of time. And you guys probably want to go get lunch. It's like 2 p.m. here in Chicago. So leave us comments. We answer them even if you're not live. We answer phone calls if you can find our phone line. If you want to be part of our texting plan, text the word, text 555. No, that's not right. Text Veracity Hill to 555-888, and we'll let you know when special deals are coming, what the show topic will be, and you can text us questions. You can Facebook us questions. We will read them. You can email Kurt questions at Veracity Hill, and we will answer them. Live or no, if you ask us a question, we're going to answer it because we want to strive for truth and help you guys strive for truth as well. That's why we're here. So we're going to end the show now. Thanks for being with us, guys. If you can put the Defenders Conference, defendersmedia.com, check out the Genocide. Why is Genocide in the Bible Conference? September 28th, 29th. Do that. Next week, we will be talking about some political issues I'm not going to give away, but if you are hot into politics and what's happening right now in our country in various aspects, I encourage you to tune in because I really want to hear. Some of you guys are really good at talking about politics, and I want to have your voice on the show. So if you want to be in chat next week when we talk about a very heavy political current, hot potato of a topic, please be here. That's next week, same bat time, same bat channel. And that's it. I'm grateful for the continued support. We all are. We can't do the show without you guys. Of our patrons, our partnership with our sponsors, Defenders Media, Consult Kevin, The Sky Floor, Rethinking Hell, the Illinois Family Institute, Fox Restoration, and Nonprofit Megaphone. Thank you to our tech team in the booth who saved our video today. And thank you for listening in and striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. Have a great afternoon, guys.
You've been listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. This is a listener-supported program. For more resources, including past shows, visit veracityhill.com.